everyone. Last time we discussed the membrane transport system. We know simple diffusion can occur through the cell membrane. Lipid-soluble substances pass through the lipid bilayer directly. Water and lipid-insoluble substances pass through the pores of the membrane. These pores are ion channels for diffusion of water, electrolytes, and other substances. What are ion channels and what functions do they have? This time we'll talk about the characteristics of ion channels. Here are the learning objectives today. At the end of this session, you should be able to outline the classifications of ion channels, predict the possible consequences caused by disorders of ion channels. Let's start with a case. Mr. Lee is a 25-year-old man. He presents to the clinic for evaluation of infertility. He has a lifelong history of productive cough and repeated pulmonary infections and recurrent renal stones. He also has many other chronic problems, such as abdominal pain, diarrhea, and difficulty in gaining weight. His chest X-ray suggests a bronchiectasis, means dilation of the bronchi. What's wrong with Mr. Lee? Why does he have so many problems? Mr. Lee has got a kind of ion channel disease, cystic fibrosis. Ion channel disease. Have you ever heard about it? It's a very common condition in Western population. What is ion channel? Why does ion channel disease involve so many organ systems? Ion channels, also called membrane channels or protein channels, they are integral proteins of cell membrane. These membranes are embedded in the membrane and form tubular pathways through the membrane. Therefore, substances can move by simple diffusion directly along these channels from one side of the membrane to the other down concentration gradient. Many of our cell membranes contain channels that permit rapid access for specific substances. When ion channel opens, it only allows certain types of ions to pass through. Thus, ion channels are selective. This selectivity is based on both the size and the charges of the channel. For example, channels lined with negative charges typically permit the passage of cations, ions with a positive electrical charge, but these channels do not allow ions to pass through. Ions are ions with negative charges. Similarly, channels lined with positive charges permit the passage of ions, but exclude cations. So, this is the characteristic feature of ion channels: selective permeability. Many of the protein channels are highly selective for transport of one or more specific ions or molecules. This selectivity determines the specificity of various channels, such as sodium ions, potassium ions, and calcium ions. Accordingly, channels are named after the ions passing through these channels. So we have sodium channels, potassium channels, calcium channels, etc. Ion channels can be divided in two basic types: ungated channels and gated channels. Ungated channels allow cell leakage, so they are also called leakage channels. They have no gates, and they are always open. Leakage channels simply allow ice or water to move according to concentration gradients. For example, many cells have leakage channels for sodium, potassium, chloride, calcium, and other ions. Gated channels can be divided into two types, voltage-gated and ligand-gated. They are open or closed by either electrical or chemical signals. What is voltage-gated channel? Voltage here refers to membrane potential or electrical potential across the cell membrane. Voltage-gated channels open when there is a change in the electrical potential. For example, in the neuromuscular junction, when the action potential reaches the axion terminal, the calcium channels are opened, and the calcium ions diffuse into the axion terminal from extracellular fluid, inducing the release of acetylcholine. Then, how about ligand-gated channels? Ligand refers to signaling molecules, such as hormones, second messengers, or neurotransmitters. These chemicals control the ligand-gated channels. For example, at the neuromuscular junction, acetylcholine is released and binds to the nicotinic receptor at the motor end plate. And this receptor is actually an ion channel. Binding of acetylcholine to the receptor opens the ion channel, followed by the diffusion of sodium ions into the neuromuscular junction. When the channel is open, the selective ions can flow through by passive diffusion, down the electrochemical gradient. But when the channel is closed, the ions cannot pass through, no matter how large the electrochemical gradient may be. The gating mechanism is a regulatory system controlling the opening and closing of gates in ion channels. Gating involves transition through the open or conducting, then closed and inactive states, accompanied by conformational changes in the ion channels. Ion channels are important in maintaining homeostasis. They are involved in generation and propagation of nerve impulses, synaptic transmission, muscle contraction, salt balance, and hormone release. For example, potassium channel dysfunction causes disorders of the heart, inherited deafness, and epileptic seizures in newborns. Dysfunction of sodium channels in the kidney results in increased osmotic pressure in the blood, causing high blood pressure or hypertension. Defects in potassium channels in the luminal membrane or chloride channels in the basolateral membrane of renal tubules result in increased excretion of water, sodium, chloride, potassium, and calcium. The salt and water loss leads to volume depletion, triggering many other responses of the body. Chloride channels play an important role in stabilization of the membrane potential, regulation of the cell membrane, transepithelial transport, and glandular secretion. Dysfunction of chloride channels results in formation of renal stones and cystic fibrosis. Cystic fibrosis is a generalized disorder affecting the functions of many organs, such as lungs, pancreas, kidneys, and testes. In cystic fibrosis, the apical chloride channels do not open. Failure of water transport results in thickening of mucus layer covering the epithelium. This is the case of Mr. Li. Cystic fibrosis is a chronic progressive disease that is eventually fatal unless a lung transplant is performed. In summary, ion channels are integral proteins of the cell membrane. They provide routes for charged particles to move across the cell membrane. Ion channels are selectively permeable to certain substances. The opening and closing of ion channels are controlled by electrical and chemical signals. And next time, we'll talk about membrane potential of the cell. Thank you, and see you next time.